Welcome to Techtastic, where we navigate the intersection of technology and business, uncovering innovations that redefine our world.
Miroslav Petrovic, welcome to It's Techtastic. It is lovely to have you here.
Thank you. Lovely to be here, Christian.
Your story is interesting for a bunch of reasons. So the first is you were born and raised in Yugoslavia before the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
And you became a refugee during the war and immigrated to Australia.
Yeah, correct.
You had a stutter when you were young and you overcame that, but you had to learn a new language, a new culture, and you're overcoming a speech impediment. And now you're a speaker, speaking at conferences, I imagine, up in front of big audiences. You've given a TED Talk, right?
Yeah.
And a best-selling book. What's the book about?
Similar. So it's called Them Goosebumps, utilizing the power of presence to own the stage of communication. So it's partially my journey and partially the principles that supported me to find my voice and use it the way I do. And beyond that, it supports any speaker to grow who they are and what they're capable of on stage. It's like a recipe for how do we keep expanding and growing and not just getting, complacent and consistent.
This sounds relevant for me. I speak at conferences. I have a podcast. I'm a CEO of a company, so I have a lot of time in front of an audience, but I know that there are things I could improve on. Like, why are people listening? Why are people seeking out my voice? That it's really important to understand. How do you find that? How did you find it for yourself? And then how do you recommend others find that?
For me, it originally came from meditation. So I didn't really want to find my voice. I didn't want to be a speaker, but I would have been let's say 20-ish, give or take a couple of years when I started meditating. My first question was this is great. I feel amazing. My eyes are closed. I'm sitting in a lotus position. I can't do anything, but this feels great. And I started asking the question of how do I feel this great while I'm, living the rest of my life? And what came back quickly was you have to start teaching. And I didn't really want to, and that kept coming up externally as well. The guy that was teaching me meditation, he's like, you're a speaker and a teacher, you need to share this stuff. Friends from high school and stuff were like, hey, can you start teaching us? And I was like, all right, it's only me that's in the way here. And as I started teaching and as those stages got bigger over the years, I found speaking in front of people was a lot like meditation. In that if I could let myself be present, the only thing that would change is there would be more sensation. You can call it fear if you want, but let's just call it more sensation, like an intensification of the experience. But also because of the stage itself, being called to attention with that many people creates a presence in and of itself. And it's almost like it took less effort than meditation to be present, as long as I didn't get swept up in the thoughts that were moving through me. That was some of the early moments of finding my voice.
Before we kicked off the conversation that we're having right now, we talked a little bit about shared experiences, and you were talking about your upcoming wedding in which you're going to ride a horse in, and so you're taking horse lessons. And one of the things you said sounded like you were in meditation on the horse, like the act of interacting with the horse and being so present in that moment with the animal that doesn't speak the same language you do, but it's going to respond to every single little body action you have. Heck, they respond better to your emotional state than you even. They know better how you're feeling than you do.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well said.
And as you were saying, your experience coming into that space reminded me of my own. I had severe stage fright. I really didn't want people looking at me or paying attention to me. Even though a lot of the things I do in my life draw attention to me, it was always meant as external, I paint and I sculpt and I'm an artist, right? But that's something I put on the wall and I can stand back from, and they're not talking and looking at me. They're looking at something that came from me. And I was in bands, but I always played the instruments that I didn't do solos, and I got to stay in the back. But the day I was at Nike and I was asked to give a presentation on something in front of the vast majority of the company, because I was the Big Brother of the Year and they wanted me to come up and tell Big Brothers Big Sisters program. They picked the best mentor to the kids that year, and it's a pretty big deal. And I won that, and Nike was big into the program, and so they asked me to come up and present. And I was not going to do it. I had the hardest time convincing myself to say yes. And then while I sat there waiting to go on stage in front of only maybe 1,000 people. What I think of today, it was a small audience, but at the time it seemed daunting. We had heart rate monitors, the early version of a fuel band that never came out. And I was sitting there and I was breathing and I was thinking to myself, okay, you can do this, you've got this. And I looked down and my heart rate was the same as it was if I went bungee jumping or kiteboarding or whatever, right? It was high. But it was high in a range that I knew. That's adrenaline. That's excitement. I seek this out.
I love that.
Yeah, and that switch in my head allowed me to just go up, and I was fine. And then once you're in the moment and you're just literally in the moment, you're just responding to the audience, you're responding to the excitement of being there. It all felt, I don't know, like just a state of calm. Like it was Zen. It was that moment right
Yeah.
after you jumped off the bridge.
Completely. And I think there's a flow state that if you can meet it in that frame, the flow state just naturally continues through the talk. It's a very long ride down from a bungee jump or whatever. Bungee jumps over like this. A talk can go for an hour, and it's like, how do I keep riding this sensation? I've even said to people, I'm like, unless you're feeling that before the talk, I'm not sure you've got much to share. Like that level of engagement is what's infusing into the audience. For me, I think speaking is a lot like riding a horse. Only you don't have one horse, you have like a massive body which is continually responding to your mental emotional state, whether they're aware of it or not. And it's almost like instant. It's like that relationship of where the speaker is at internally is continually informing the space, and it's happening unconsciously as well. Just like a horse.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Like you've got a whole herd of horses you're riding while you're up on stage giving your presentation. It's a really good visual for me. One of the nice things, like especially in a larger audience, is there's lights and darkness. Like you're in the light, everybody else is in darkness. And so you can only really see little bits of the audience at any one time. You don't really see the main body because it's just lights in your face. You can't really see much. But when you can see, and you look around and you see people like excitedly engaged with what you're saying, and they're responding to it in some way, that energy coming back in, it's such a good feeling. And the hard part for me was always like, sometimes you're at a big conference and a lot of the people are there just to talk to each other. They're not there to hear you. It's just the main hall was where they were meeting somebody. And so like they're distracted, they're talking to each other, and you've got to just kind of like brush by it and be like, okay, they're in their space, they're doing their thing. That doesn't impact me. It has nothing to do with me. That's about them. I just look for the next one that is smiling and looking and paying attention or frowning. Like some of the best interactions I've had where people are like, no, you're wrong. Like, and it was like, okay, I want to, like, I'm going to dig in on that until I can get that person to be like, yeah, okay, I gotcha. Like, I'm there with you. I want to like feed off of that. And the more of it I can get, that I can, if you could say something truly challenging to the audience so that they're in a state of being like, I'm skeptical. Prove what you're telling me. That's fun. That back and forth that can happen, even though they're not talking to you, because they're in the audience. They're not directly interacting. They are interacting though. It's just not in the form of verbal cues, right?
I remember I had a student that hadn't done much speaking at one point, and we did some training, and her first gig getting up on stage, I don't know whether it would have been under 100 people. She was like, oh my God, Miroslav, that was amazing. Like, I now get what you were saying. When I asked them questions, I felt the emotion in the room change. Like it was visceral when they went into, dreaming about their future. It's like I was getting goosebumps on stage. I'm like, yeah, it's like you're working with a giant ocean. The human mind and emotions, when you stir it towards, anger or joy or whatever, it's like you put a group of people feeling the same thing, it affects everyone. And we see that in the bad way as well, like with hooliganism. People get swept up. They're like, I'd never do anything like that. So it's powerful. Like it's very powerful.
It is. And to put yourself in the middle of it, that was always it's intoxicating, or it can be. And that's where you end up with the demagogue, individual that's all they do is they put themselves in the middle of it. So one of the things that you talk about is speaking from their hearts and authenticity and how that comes across in an audience. And I've actually spoken to so many people that do a lot of presenting and they're there to sell. And 9 times out of 10, the person that's there to sell something, they lose the audience. Nobody cares. They get lost in it. But that 1 in 10 that really believes in what they're selling, they're really there sharing what they believe. Those ones are often like the most amazing presentations you watch. They're not selling something that's meaningless outside them. If they're literally selling something they care about, it comes across and it's so obvious. One of the things though that I meant to ask this as a question more than as a statement is, I think that anybody who does this enough, you start to question yourself on it. You're like, am I just selling this thing? Is this something I really believe in? How do I know anymore? Because you do it so frequently. And finding that, being able to take a big step back and say, yeah, no, I actually do wholeheartedly believe in what I'm doing. I've got a script that I go through now as a shorthand way of getting me there, but I do believe in it. How do you stop yourself from getting lost in that? Or how do you find your authentic self when you've lost it?
This is a really good pondering, and it's something I think we have to keep coming back to. And I think like anything, I'm going to dive into that bit for a moment. But the first thing I'm going to say, when we get automatic with anything, I think it's useful to have periods of reflection. Like, yes, I'm in the grind of this now. I get how to do it. I'm doing it. And then can I stop and reflect and just attune to, is this still authentic for me? Is this still what I want to be doing? Have I been swept away by the experts, the industry, what my clients want me to do? Or am I still on track with serving what feels authentic for me? Like the life that I want to live and build and be happy with when I get to the tombstone. And I just think that's a continual thing we have to be in relationship to. You know, like life is a beast. It's so easy. It's like that Tony Robbins story that he tells, like you turn the golf stick 2 degrees and you're going to end up, hundreds of meters from where you want to be. And I think having good people around us also helps with that. Like people that really understand us and what we're about and that are willing to stand for what they see as possible within us. Like I really believe in having high quality people who understand. And then the second thing, I'm just going to pepper this in as well, is what I realized at some point is, well, sales and enrollment, it's almost the same thing with a different word, right? And we're always selling, we're always enrolling people when we're on stage, when we're in leadership, when we're in management, we're enrolling people into how we want them to be, to act, to move the company where we want it to go. I mean, we're always enrolling our children and our partners as well. It's just like, sometimes the ideas are taking us for a ride. But when I found this, I was like, okay, the thing that I'm enrolling people into isn't changing. That hasn't really changed for the last 10 or 15 years. The wording around it has changed, which is just the wrapping, but the essence of it hasn't changed. And the products or the services that I'm selling on top of that are just a shortcut. It's like, here's my offering. Live your life in the truest way you can and recognize that your voice is the fastest way to creating the life you want. Whether it's a date, a relationship, more sales in your business, all of this is going to come down to speaking. And I truly and wholeheartedly believe that. It's like our life is a product of the things we've had the courage to say and the things we've avoided saying, the opportunities we've left on the table. So there's a part of me that feels so comfortable in selling that message because even if people never work with me, if they're enrolled in that, they're going to live the best life they can. And then if there's a match to work together and to support them in that just feels like a beautiful coming together.
So Miroslav Petrovic, that was a great way to end it. If people are looking to find your book, connect with you as a coach, lessons, how do they find you?
Yeah, easy. Miroslav Petrovic on LinkedIn. Miroslavp.com is the website, miroslavp.com. You can find me on any social media. It's Miroslav Petrovic. Just reach out, say hi. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with Christian. So if you're part of his community, I'm sure we're going to get along. And the book's available on Amazon, Spotify, all the main places you can find it.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Techtastic. I want to thank you personally for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Until then, keep exploring and stay curious. Thank you for listening. If you are new here and enjoyed the content, please subscribe. It really helps us out. And if you are a regular listener, thanks so much for your continued support.
Overwhelmed by tech debt? Discover Vala AI, the solution to tech challenges with the simplicity of a click. No engineering background? No problem. Vala AI enables anyone to effortlessly tackle tech issues, freeing up your time from tech headaches. Make tech debt vanish with Vala AI, where your tech solutions are just a click away.